Hello and welcome to a rare, indeed unique video episode of Revolution Comes to the Podcast. I've decided to go video for this one. It's taken me ages to arrange it, just because there's lots of pictures to look at in this one, and I thought it would be better to see them instead of me painting word pictures. Now, what this episode is about is looking at the section I entitled The People You Meet, which contains the character types that player characters can be in Malandros, but also flows in from the setting chapter. It's sort of a transitional phase from learning about the background to then the people in the neighborhood, because as you may or may not recall from the previous episode, you create the PCs based on these archetypes, but then all the other archetypes are assumed to exist in your game as characters that are sort of hovering around in the background, ready to use as well. And then after this chapter, it segues into character creation. Now, one thing I might have done differently, I think, if I were doing it now, is to be a bit more explicit about that, perhaps with a note at the very start of the book. Because there's, for example, there are mechanical terms on these pages that don't get explained till a bit later. And at the time, the intention for a lot of this book was it was intended to teach the people reading it and playing the game about the use of malicia, the sort of cunning and deceptiveness as a philosophical concept in capoeira, but kind of make them deal with things within the game. We'll come to it later. There are some deliberate gaps in rules frameworks for that reason, but maybe I should have been more explicit about that earlier on in the text. Then again, I only really thought of that earlier today, so the overall, I don't know, maybe it's not a big deal. I don't know what I will do though. I think I will go and share a different screen from this, because there's a lot of double page spreads, which will look better I share from the PDF reader instead. So we don't need to go exactly into how this works, but let's make my picture a little bit smaller here. Each character type in the game gets a double page spread, as you can see. Big name in Portuguese of the type, and then a little translation in English. Some of these translations were harder than others. A relevant quote, I think so, yeah, from contemporary text. A very brief discussion, and then the abilities and signature moves they get. And you see on the left, there's always a big full-page picture. It kind of is 50-50 photos and paintings. I tried to alternate, but I wasn't really able to do that with every type because it's quite hard to find things for that. And then a smaller illustration on the bottom, on the right-hand side, you can see underneath each one that sort of sets the scene. So this one, the Cabecilia, is really a core type in the game. It's the kind of the equivalent of the whatever the gang leader's called in Apocalypse World. Is it the Chopper? Yeah. And this is, and if you look at the writings of Vincent Baker in his design blog from years ago now, he talks about how a character there's a balance between being mechanically powerful and kind of powerful in the fiction. So the Cabecilia runs a gang, but if you look at how their moves actually work later on, you see that really the gang functions mainly to bring them trouble, which of course is ideal. I have this sort of theory that if you're playing someone who has an establishment, runs a business, runs a group, you either want to see that thing kind of coming from the start and building up, or you want to see it being destroyed. You don't want it to be just happening. That's boring. So let me see. On the left there, this one is one of the least contemporary illustrations in the book. So as you see, like all the things in here, nearly everything in the book is public domain artworks, be it a photo or a painting, with some exceptions. The reason for that being twofold. One is, I'd be lying if I said cost wasn't a factor. These things are free, and you can find them, and that's good. It takes a lot of finding, I tell you. And sort of behind the scenes are folders and folders of photos and paintings that didn't quite make it. Some that I really fell in love with, but I couldn't justify using them for like a section up here, and then I tried to get them later in the book, that kind of thing. But the other reason, though, for using existing images was I really wanted to use contemporary renderings of what we were talking about to paint the picture of the setting. Now, this one, the Cabasilia, absolutely doesn't do that. This photo is actually from the 1950s in Cuba, but the guy is wearing the perfect suit. There's a great expression. And I'd like to say, as far as I know, not affiliated with any criminal gangs whatsoever. This is a fine, upstanding, dapper gentleman from Cuba, and it's not his fault. Though I thought he looked cool. And if you were to uncrop this image, I think it's slightly to the left, you would see an ad for Coca-Cola, which would ruin the illusion. So that's why it's cropped as it is. On the bottom right, though, very contemporary. This is a cartoon from, I've forgotten which newspaper, but it's from an 1890s newspaper depicting two capoeiras, as they were called at the time, so two capoeira practitioners, members of the Malta gangs, fighting in the street. You can see the one on the left has a straight razor in his hand, and he's down on sort of bending one left hand down in something a little similar to the resistencia, defensive posture in contemporary capoeira, but not the same. So yeah. And then the capoeirista. So this was one where the Cabasilia is very much a core type. The capoeirista is a very sort of peripheral figure. So obviously, I think a big part of the draw for me, and I hope for people reading the book, was the history of capoeira, and therefore it made sense to have a martial artist type in here. But capoeirista is very much a sort of outsider, in a way similar to perhaps how in some of the Conan the Barbarian short stories, Conan rocks up into town, people see that he's a great fighter and they want to recruit him to their side, or like the man with no name in A Fistful of Dollars. And that's the plot that you tend to get with this character. They're good at, they're handy with their fists and their feet, but they don't necessarily, how to put it, they don't necessarily have a fixed role in the community, and that makes them feel a bit alienated. I think this painting helps as well. That's by, see if it's in my files. It might not be. It is just called the Capoeirista. I remember that much. And this is by a Brazilian artist. And on the right here, you can see this a drawing by, I think by Caribe, no, maybe not, of two guys playing capoeira in a square. Yeah, the comerciante, the street trader. This is a classic one for being in a community-based game, and you can, very flexible as well. So a lot of players will use this for all kinds of, florists seem to come up a lot, fruit sellers, because that's in the illustration down here. And then the photo of the woman on the left is, I think, very evocative. She's one of the ones I really liked. And she's looking at you like this. I think it's very important to have these illustrations where you feel like you could, actually, I don't know if I would get on very well with this woman. She looks like she didn't suffer fools gladly, but you know what I mean? You feel like you could almost, you can imagine what they'd be like to be around. And the estivador, the dock worker. This is one where you can see that there's some quite glamorous seeming roles, right? The gang leader, the mafia guy, the martial artist, the dock worker, and even the street trader. These are very, well, like quite mundane and dull seeming on the surface. And I think that's quite important. I think even if people don't choose these archetypes they are crucial for people to understand the context in which they're operating. But actually, a lot of people do pick the dock worker. I think the idea of the blue collar on the waterfront characters is quite popular. Now, the business tycoon and the magnate. This is one that is chosen pretty often, but again, it's one that stands out because the magnate is obviously very fictionally powerful. But of course, simply picking this character type is effectively declaring war on everyone else. It's a very hateable character type for obvious reasons. This is a painting by, I think it's his name, Guillaume Caillebotte, called Jeune homme à la fenêtre, young man at the window, which I think, judging from the demeanor of this guy, I think they defined young men differently in those days. So yes, this is actually a French painting, but I think I had some sort of facing forwards. I think this is the only illustration where you can't see the face of the character. Well, this one had a sense of loneliness, because I did want to have. I had a few where it was obviously like a rich guy who's enjoying life, doesn't really have any problems, and I wanted to give something that would evoke a feeling of maybe of sympathy, maybe not, but like at least some kind of inner turmoil in the character. A totally satisfied business tycoon is not a fun character to play, but one who is, and this is often the thing, is similar to the Pescifora d'Agua, which we'll get to later. The character that sort of wants to be friends with everyone, but you can't really be friends because your background and your money separates you from everyone. Not that it really bothers rich people in real life, but in books. The Maleki. So this photo is from a collection of essentially ethnographic and anthropological portraits from Brazil in the just after post-slavery era. And once again, I cannot find the details for this. I think I've put things in the wrong folder. If I look it up later, I'll put things in the show notes, as they say. And then at the bottom right, this is a painting of beachcombers by Turner. And I chose that one because that's kind of allusion to one of the big Appendix N books for this, Captains of the Sands, which is about these Malekis, these street kids who live in a disused, I think it's like they call it a boathouse, but I think it's like a repair, yeah. It's not as in a pleasure boat, it's a sort of an old boat fixing house, and they live near the beach. And they go out there to pick up stuff and just to play and things. And the interesting thing in that book is that a lot of these kids aren't actually orphaned or living on the streets, but they sort of semi-are. They're like latchkey kids, but with very minimal use of said latchkey, you could say. So, yeah, and this, I will say, this is a character type that doesn't get picked that often. I can see why. I think it feels too vulnerable, maybe, especially if you're playing in a group of people you don't know very well. It might be something too similar in feeling to playing like the kid or the Ewok in a Star Wars game. Feels like it won't fit in properly. But when it is chosen, the literal difference between kids and adults, like kids of course, kids say the funniest things. They're able to break through many of the barriers that adults have in a way that players of role-playing games can find pretty useful and fun to play. Now, the musical. This one is, I'd say, kind of a non-essential archetype in a way, because it is doesn't have a direct role in the community. I mean, obviously, you can be a regular, everyone knows who you are, but it's a bit similar to the capoeirista in that you're a practitioner of an art form, you have value. The musical is different, though, because they occupy that liminal space between working and the wealthy classes. The musician is someone who does work for a living, usually is not from a wealthy background, unless perhaps they're elevated by being a composer or something, and yet they'll be invited into the fancy balls and mansions and so on. So that's the function the musical has. This painting on the left is by Edgar Degas. It's a painting of a particular friend of his, I think. Let's see if I can check the name. Yeah, Lorenzo Pagans is the guitarist, and I think it's his father, Auguste Degas, in the background, but the musician is Lorenzo Pagans. So I find the musician, and of course musicians, like, they have that association with the rock and roll lifestyle and tendency to get into all kinds of scrapes. And so even though there's no mechanical thing for that particularly, it tends to happen to musicians anyway. No, here is a core archetype for sure. I think I've had a Pesce Fuori d'Agua in every single game of Malandros I've played in or run. I think rich kid who wants to go and hang out with the people on the wrong side of the tracks. And this painting, honestly, is one of my favorites as well in the book. This is an 1889 painting by Arturo Michelena of Emilia Alcalá, who was much like the archetype. She really was the daughter of a wealthy family, although to my knowledge she never got involved in inappropriate music, illegal martial arts, or hanging out with people in the Lapa Quarter of Rio de Janeiro, but she was a real Brazilian noble. And then this bottom right painting, this is in the French one, I think. This is I have forgotten, but yeah, it's a picture of people arriving at the ballet, I want to say, in Paris. And so yeah, so this is kind of the opposite of the musician. So the musician is working class and ends up in sort of aristocrat circles. Pesce Fuori d'Agua, which means literally a fish out of water, goes the other way. And the quote here is, amore fuoco che arde sem si ve. Love is a fire that burns without being seen. So some of these quotes that I put in are quite obviously relevant, right? So for the Maleki, I've got a quote from the Captains of the Sands, Captains da Areia, which is about these kids, like, who live on the streets. Musicians got to think about music. The Camões quote here is just to allude to the kind of plots that the slumming aristocrat gets into, and it works. Well, I think Graham Walmsley's talked about role-playing prompts a lot, and this whole chapter is designed to just be a bunch of prompts for sort of pushing the players to what they could be. Some quite obviously, like telling you what the idea for the character is, and some slightly subtly, like I think this choice of a quote. Okay, the pescador, the fisherman. Right, this one's a really problematic one because it's sort of a lot like the what's the one in Apocalypse World? That's the driver, right? The fisherman has a thing. He's got a boat. He goes away for a long time. He comes back. You've got to really be on your toes to play this correctly as a player. By the way, this is this is the wrong photo for this in a way, but I couldn't find any good illustrations of actual Brazilian fishermen. So this is it's a photo from around the turn of the 20th century. But these are North American fishermen. I want to say west coast of the USA. But if you crop it correctly, it looks all right. And then we've got a stormy sea there, painting on the right, which I also don't have in my notes. This is going great. Never mind. But that's the thing I sort of don't think I've mentioned. Is I was trying to do. Yeah, whenever I could, I would put like a photo opposite a painting and a painting opposite a photo. But again, I wasn't able to do it universally. And so the pescador, it's very easy for them to become isolated from the other characters in the game. And the GM and the players, you're calling your own scenes. It's a drama system game, so you can just make yourself be in scenes. But sometimes the fisherman will kind of lose touch with everyone else. And I've had once, like, the player just sort of voluntarily wrote himself out of the story and brought in a new PC, and that's fine actually. And it quite well mirrors sometimes things that happen in those realist novels of the 19th century. Proprietario, yeah, this is the landlord. This is your Maestro D from Apocalypse World, essentially. This is a great one because they kind of come with their own location for everyone to meet and have a reason to just be in their place. So that's good. This is a detail from, I've forgotten who this painting's by. I'm going to say, although I can see a lot of dancers in the background. So I'm going to go Degas again, probably. How does this look? Unfortunately, yeah, I don't have access to some of the link files for these layouts, so I can't find them. But, yeah, the cop. This is one that almost never gets picked, I think, because people don't like cops that much. Every so often they do, and then they're usually played as the one sort of naive idealist who joined up and is upset about how corrupt and rubbish the police force actually is. And the illustration on the right there is actually, these are the uniforms from 1852, so maybe a bit out of period for the officers of the guard. But what I found with this one, I'll tell you, I spent ages researching how the police worked in Rio at various times, and it kept getting changed and reorganized all the time, like seemingly several times a year for a while. And the structure of how it worked was opaque to me, no matter how much I read. And eventually I realized even if I figure this out, which felt very unlikely, even if I figure this out, how am I going to explain it in a way that won't be terminally boring for the reader and needlessly complex? And then I just realized, you know what, when you watch a detective show, all you need to know is this person is allowed to go into places and say, open up, police, and that person has a boss who makes them do stuff, and there's some kind of hierarchy. You don't really need to know what that hierarchy actually is. So in the end, I put nothing. So, yeah. I think this is the last one. Yeah, the vigorista. So that means a sort of swindler. I put grifter in the end. I spent ages trying to figure out how to translate this one. So con artist, grifter, and this is your real roguish type. The illustration there is a flor de rua, the flower. Antonio Pereiras. Oh, who I think actually did the Capoeirista painting as well. So this is and the illustration on the right is I'm sorry, I found the Proprietario painting. It's actually Edouard Manet, that one, and the one L'Ami, I guess it's pronounced, I'm not sure, by Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec. And I seem to have lost my screen share, which is... So the vigorista is again, I would say a non-core type, because they're a little bit outside of the society of the little, the block where you live. But having said that, it's a very flexible type, like any kind of, you sort of get to mix and match your own larceny on this one. So it's flexible, but doesn't come in, I would say, gets chosen less often than the others. But I will say, as an NPC, it's a very useful type to have in your pocket as the GM, because it's the sort of I know a guy character that people can turn to for help with all kinds of things. And then finally, yeah, this is the last spread of the people you meet. and it's names. We all know the worst part of making a character in a role-playing game is coming up with a name, so I decided to do that for people. Surnames were tricky, so I tried to keep that simple in how they work. You know, if you're rich, you might have a lot of the names, otherwise you don't. And I also split them up by origin a bit, so some are religious, some are from place names, some are patronymics, but I didn't bother explaining what they all meant. You know, you can Google it if you want. Same with the nicknames, actually. Gang members and capoeiristas, they often have nicknames, apellidos, and so I did a whole bunch of them, but I didn't bother translating them. Quite a few in here are just the capoeira nicknames of people I know in real life that I put in, and I will not tell you which they are. And of course, the funny thing about capoeira nicknames is there's quite a few people in here whose real names I just simply do not know, because that is how you find it. And I think one of the oddities sometimes of doing capoeira is you meet people's family members, and they start talking about someone. You're like, who is Maria? I don't know. And then you're, oh right, yeah, it's Brasaforte or whatever her nickname might be. All right, that is my run through the people you meet. I think this is kind of the most important section of the whole game, right? Like if you had just this to work with, like at the table, and you sort of going to try and reverse engineer how the game might work, I think you might manage it. I don't think you wouldn't land on the exact same framework. The game would be more your own jazz improvisation of Malandros. But this is kind of it in these few pages. These are the people you meet, and these are the people that make up your story. And overall, I'm pretty pleased with the selection of how I did this. I wanted this to be something that you could give to people at the table in their first game and let them just flip through. Not too much to read, not too much to learn, but get the feel of what they're doing and to look at the pictures and go, oh yeah, I want to be that person. So, I mean, I'm looking at the blend, like the fade on this illustration here now, and being annoyed by it. There are some things that are very hard to make work in the layout, but overall, not too bad, I think. So, yeah, that's all. It's on the recording. So, thank you very much for watching or listening, and thank you as well to the Patreon supporters who make this possible. And if you'd like to join their number of erudite and good-looking people, you can do that at patreon.com/porcupine publishing. That's the standard promo bit. I'm going to go now and have a cup of tea.